Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala ashrafil anbiya wa sayyid al mursaleen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu to the MCMC community. Welcome everyone. Today we are actually going to be tackling an extremely important topic for all of us, the topic of atheism. Just a very brief setting the context before I turn it over to our lead for today. The atheist framework, the atheist thinking permeates so much of modern life. In colleges and universities, in the news, on the news channels, in entertainment, in books and magazines, on social media, the atheist thinking dominates. The atheists' suppositions, their conclusions, belief in God, in revelation, in prophets is ridiculed as something lacking intellectual and rational basis, as the opiate of the masses. Paradoxically, a universe without a creator coming into existing by itself, with matter and energies and forces that are fine-tuned to the most precise degree, and not just with matter and energy, but also consciousness. That is considered rational. So today, alhamdulillah, we are joined with Maulana Shakeel Rahman, who will help us think through these topics. He was born and raised in the United States. He got his education from Darul Quran wa Sunnah in Queens. Along with studying traditional Islamic sciences, he also memorized the Quran, and he also has a degree in a BA in psychology from the City College of New York. He has spent over a decade conducting talks and programs for the youth, and currently he is the Imam of the Islamic Center of Burlington in Massachusetts. I heard this presentation that Maulana Shakeel did at ICMC, the Islamic Center of Mercer County, a while back, and it was very beneficial, and I reached out to him, and alhamdulillah, he accepted to help us also think through this and to remove the seeds of doubt, because the most dangerous aspect of atheism is that it plants seeds of doubt. It is couched in rationality, and those seeds then unfortunately germinate and take hold. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce and turn it over to Maulana Shakeel Rahman, who will take us through the next 1.5 hours, a little bit more maybe, and walk us through this.
Jazakallah khairan, Brother Zija. May Allah SWT accept from yourself and accept from your community, and for all the brothers and sisters who contributed to making this program reality. May Allah SWT accept it and allow us, inshallah ta'ala, to, by this program, allow us to remove the doubts in our hearts, the doubts in the hearts of others, and grant us a beautiful walk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this life, and grant us Jannatul Firdaus in the hereafter. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. Alhamdulillah wa kafa wa salamun ala ibadi alladhina astafa ma ba'd. فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قالت رسلهم أفي الله شك فاطر السماوات والأرض. So today's program, inshallah ta'ala, will be about, like our beloved brother had introduced in the beginning, about atheism. And so I want to mention from the get-go, it is a little bit of a longer program than you're normally used to. And so please get yourself seated. I heard that the snow is coming down in your areas, so might as well get the hot coffee and the cocoa out, mashallah. And so that way you can really take as much benefit as you can. I'm at your service for the next 2 hours or however long we're here for, inshallah. And I don't mind any questions that you have, as long as they're related to the topic. I will try my best to help out and provide some thoughts on every question that you provide, inshallah. And I would humbly request Brother Zija to, inshallah ta'ala, if you can just, monitor the questions, etc., and we can take them during the breaks, inshallah ta'ala. So having said that, this topic is of crucial importance, like was mentioned. And we see it for myself. I've seen it in my cousins. I've seen it in my families. Many of us have family members who have adopted atheism, and they have completely abandoned Islam. And sometimes we have questions in ourselves. And the reason why this program is called Why Me is that in reality, it all kind of comes back to this question. Why is God doing this to me? Right? And I hope, inshallah ta'ala, by the end, we get a beautiful answer for that for ourselves, and provide contentment for the hearts, inshallah. So there are three parts to this program. We're going to talk about atheism in brief. Now, we don't have enough time to go through it in detail like I wanted to, but it's because of the shortness of time. We'll condense it as much as we can. The existence of God will be the main discussion that we'll have, and then the issue of the problem of evil, which we'll address near the end, inshallah ta'ala, which is the most enjoyable part for us as Muslims. Really, it really is. And so the last thing I'll say before we begin is that make sure, inshallah, that for yourselves, whenever you have a question, it is required of you, and especially about your faith, it is required of you and me that we go to a scholar and we get this question addressed. Any doubts we have about our faith and beliefs, it's wajib. It is a requirement of our religion that we go and ask questions. فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of remembrance if you don't know. And so we have to remember this. Don't allow yourself to suffer from doubts and allow it to creep into your hearts, and then allow it to poison your worship, and then ultimately maybe it will take us off the path. We ask Allah for tawfiq and guidance, and allow us to be on the straight path to the day that we meet Him, inshallah ta'ala. So atheism, I think many of us already know that the word atheist or ism is not a theist, right? Someone who doesn't believe in God. And so it's a very generic term. In traditional and historic, and when we look at it historically speaking, it was used for a lot more than just a person who didn't believe in God at all. It's also used for people who had deviated in their beliefs. So anyone who wasn't a theist, who believed in the oneness of God, would sometimes be called an atheist too. So it was a very, very general term, and you see it throughout Christian writings, etc. That's the term atheist. In terms of agnostic, is someone that you and I could, we probably have met people like this, who they don't say that, I believe in God. They don't say that I don't think God doesn't exist or whatever. They just say that we don't know what's out there. It's just a mystery. And so that's a person we might traditionally meet with in our lives, or maybe the first one as well. So I want to give you a brief timeline. We look here. And again, I would spend a bit more time on this, but shortness of time won't allow us to do that. So atheism really starts off with, and I'll explain why near the end, about how it really starts off with Iblis. He's the source of these doubts and source of these ideas and thoughts. He's the first one to go and say to Allah, "Oh Allah, because you misguided me, because you did this evil," right? So he's the first one to attribute this type of the problem of evil that we say, you made this happen to me. This all started with him. So he's the source of these doubts. And so it goes further into history, into the Greeks. Atheism really starts to rise with these Greek philosophers. You get people like Epicurus and Democritus and these various other philosophers of the time who really bring out these same atheistic ideas. And so these thoughts of the Greek philosophers it has its small little clique. People start to vibe with it, and they have these small little schools that they have, but it doesn't get any bigger than that. So then, it kind of just dies out for a long time. And you'll notice between the Greeks and Christian Europe, which is the 1600s, there's a huge gap of time. And the reason why that is because during the middle of all that, the reason why atheism didn't really get a chance to spread is that you really have, mashallah, and it's a historical fact, it's not just something I'm saying, but because Islam was a dominant force in the world, and because it's such a religion, an amazing religion that allows the freedom of religion. It was an accepted principle that people are not forced or coerced into their faith. And so because of that, even atheists who would write intellectual tomes and different articles against Islam, and they would refute Islam, and even Christians who would refute Islam, and Jews who would object to Islam, would all be living within Islamic lands. A very famous area is called the area of Cordoba, Qurtuba. Qurtuba was a place where Imam Qurtubi, the famous Mufassir, the commentary of the Quran, he writes about how he would very regularly meet the rabbis and Jews, and he would meet the priests and the Christians, and he would engage with them and discuss with them. And so they had this type of scholarly discussion without any type of animosity or things like that in between. So Islam really allowed people to express who they were. And because of that, this atheism didn't really find ground to grow. Thereafter, we find within Christian Europe, though, Christian Europe is an entirely different discussion because of the fact that there were a lot more stringent rules. You and I both know that the church at that time was the supreme law of the land. And for you to even consider disbelief would be such a heresy and such a atrocity that they would maybe subject you to being given the capital punishment, for example. Right, so there's a lot of bad stuff that happens within Christian Europe, where atheism starts to find its rise again, and a lot of different issues with Christianity that don't seem to make sense for the atheists. We'll get to some of them, hopefully, inshallah, later. And then finally, it goes to the Enlightenment, where these philosophers who will really take up the Greek thought from so many years ago, they take it, and these philosophers, you might know them as Voltaire and many others, that they take these ideas and they further them. And then in the 1800s, we find that the theory of evolution, where Charles Darwin takes his historic trip to the Galapagos Islands, and then he looks at the finches, etc. Because of that, the atheism found its intellectual or scientific backbone, so that way it could survive, so that way it could thrive, and it could find a reason to say that now we have a reason. Like Dawkins said, he said that Darwin made it possible to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist, right, or intellectually satisfied atheist. And then in the 1900s, we see the disgusting plant of atheism to grow into the state religions. And what happens is many of these countries that we find, unfortunately, what happens is they adopt atheism as their state religion, meaning that they reject any other faith, right? Nazism. You get Soviet Union, you get all these different countries that come out to say we're atheists, we don't believe in any formal organized religion. And there's a lot of bloodshed, a lot of violence that occurs because of it, right? And so there's something that it is a guilty conscience that a lot of atheists have to live with, that if you don't live with the moral code, a organized or structured moral code, you got to deal with that baggage too, you know? And so it did lead to such things like this as well. And then finally to new atheism, which we're going to talk about inshallah ta'ala. Okay, so and if you have any questions, please feel free. Okay, and this is just, again, giving you a brief summary of what Jesus spoke about. It emerged with Iblis. Seeds were planted in the Roman Empire before Christianity in about 300 BC. It lays in the ground for centuries until the 1600s, right? And then it begins to find water and soil as religion and science begin to conflict or clash with each other. Okay, it sprouts up during the American and French revolutions. You'll notice that, you could really argue this, that one of the first quote-unquote secular or quote-unquote even, say, separated from religion, the first country to really embed that or to take that into their principles is America. America really just, from the get-go was like, we're just going to separate church and state because of reasons. But of course, like, you can't, there are little problems, pragmatically speaking, whatever. Don't worry about that. But having said that, America and France both take up this hatred towards wherever they came, and a big step towards secularism, right? So, and then finally it starts to bud in the Enlightenment, which is in the 1800s, and it grows into these roots with atheism becoming state religions in the 1900s, and then finally it becomes the wicked plant that we see today with neo-atheism in the 2000s. Okay, so it's a very short timeline. You're like, what? It's 2,300 years. It's very short timeline. We have many religions that survive longer than that. Human beings have been on this earth for longer than that. It's not what I want everyone to understand is it's not a new issue. There's never been a new issue. A lot of times we tell ourselves this is a new thing. We need new answers, new responses. And I'll let you know that anything I've done for research for this topic has only been through Islamic texts and works, because I've seen that our scholars have already addressed these things over and over and over again. And so this has never been a new issue per se. It's something that the Greeks had come up with, and many of the same questions that they had are the same exact jargon or jumbled mess that the new atheists present today. It's not really anything new. So hopefully, inshallah, we can see that when we discuss these ideas here. So I'm going to jump straight to the 1800s and 1900s just to talk about Charles Darwin. Okay, when he pens his magnum opus, The Origin of Life, I think it should have said intellectually satisfied atheist, but I'll confirm it. I'm sorry if that quote, it might be a mistake, but I'll make sure. Richard Dawkins said it, right? In 1900 to 2000, because again, we have to look at the effects. What happens is sometimes we forget that a worldview is not only what you believe about God. Okay, it's not only about what you believe about God. You and I as Muslims have a moral code. We have an ethic. We have certain things that we abide by, certain principles we live by, certain things we consider to be absolutely haram, and certain things we consider that they're permissible or allowed. An atheist, because of the fact that they don't have any universal morals, morality is all subjective. Because of that, they have to live with this baggage that whenever someone wants to take atheism and ride with it and do something absolutely impermissible, absolutely wicked, they can. And so religions, countries that adopted communism, like Russia becomes the first atheistic state. It repressed religions, right? And you know about how much manslaughter and bloodshed was caused in these areas of Russia at the time. China joins in there as well. We find around 1970, 22 nations of Central and Eastern Europe became essentially atheistic. So we find this entire growth of atheism all over the European and Asiatic lands. We find Nazism. Hitler emphasized this. He said in one of his talks in 1941, I put in bold for you, National Socialism and religion will no longer be able to exist together. The ideal solution will be to leave the religions to devour themselves without persecutions. So again, they're all spitting the same exact discussions that you're hearing today. It's the same exact thing the atheists of the past have said. And such a terrible atheist like what you're hearing here, or someone who believed in secularism to separate the church and state, like Hitler here, is also in line with these types of beliefs and ideas. Okay, the 21st century, what we find today is new atheism. And why is it such a pertinent or a difficult topic? Is because of the fact that whereas before, back in the 2000s, or I'm sorry, back in the 1900s and etc., all the way down, you were an atheist, but you didn't really force anyone else to become an atheist too. In other words, there was no dawah, there was no invitation to become an atheist. What happens in the 21st century is that nowadays people are actually pushing and shoving this idea of atheism down our throats. So they say things like this: religion should not simply be tolerated, but should be countered, criticized, and exposed by rational argument. And I want everyone to know that the reason why they have such an issue, and one thing that sparked them with so much animosity towards Islam, is because you know what happened on September 11th, right in the beginning of the 2000s. Because of that incident, they considered all religions to be evil and violent. And they considered their target numero uno, the first target on their list, is Islam. Because of that reason, because of what their feelings towards this, they consider a violent religion. Okay? So now we can shift to the discussion of new atheism. So when it comes to new atheists, they consider science, and this is something you're probably noticing too. We love science. I love science. I hope everyone else here loves science too. But scientism as a worldview, that science can explain everything. Okay, and it's not just the fact that it's not enough that one does not believe, but everyone must not believe. Right? They want to give the dawah again. Okay, and don't confuse scientism with Scientology. Two different things, right? Very different things. Scientism again is the idea that science will explain everything, and you see this to be espoused or spread by these new atheists. And they say things like this: that faith is a virus. We also find that there are four horsemen of new atheism. The first one that we find is Sam Harris. Sam Harris is an American author, philosopher, neuroscientist. He's a critic of religion. I think his big moments were when he wrote his books, The Moral Landscape and The End of Faith. Those are really big books he wrote. And he believes that Islam has a dogmatic commitment to using violence to defend one's faith, but both from within and without, to varying degrees. He says it is a central Islamic doctrine that is found in a few other religions to the same degree. He legitimately thinks Islam is a violent religion, and he actually said in one discussion he had that it's just easy to just drop a bomb on them. I just finished them all. So you wonder, who's really violent here? Even the Crusades. Such a terrible massacre of human beings and lives, done by one faith. And of course, we never blame the followers of the faith. Some people just hijack a religion and they use it for whatever they want, right?
Excuse me, Moazab, your audio is cracking. There seems to be a little bit of static.
Is it better now?
It was fine the first 15 or so minutes. It just in the last 2 minutes, there seems to be a little bit of cracking, and it's breaking. Let's see how it goes. Maybe you may need to log off and log back on, but let's see how it goes for the next minute or so.
Okay. Please, you can text me too, just so I can see if it's okay.
Okay.
And then if I need to, I'll just log out. Okay, no problem. So Sam Harris. So again, he considers, again, you wonder who's the real the violent people here, because of the fact that they're just their solutions to these problems are unbelievably violent, right? They lead to so many massacres and so much bloodshed. Okay, Sam Harris is number one. We find Christopher Hitchens, who passed away in 2011. He's the English author and journalist. He's a self-acclaimed anti-theist. He says an anti-theist, a term I'm trying to get into circulation. I don't think he really got it into circulation, but it's someone who is relieved that there's no evidence for such an assertion in God, right? He says organized religion is the main source of hatred in the world. Okay, he calls religions violent, irrational, intolerant, allied to racism, tribalism, and bigotry, invested in ignorance and hostile to free inquiry, contemptuous of women and coercive toward children. It ought to have a great deal on his conscience. Right, that's what he used to say. Okay, Daniel Dennett. We have a third, one of the four horsemen here. Daniel Dennett is an American philosopher. He used to say things like he believes evolution can account for the origin of morality, and he actually has some research into clerics who are secretly atheists. He used to go around interviewing them and say, do you really believe in what you're preaching? I can't believe such people would make things like this into research studies. Allah Ta'ala knows best. And then the final one is Richard Dawkins. Right? He used to be a lot more popular than he is now. I think Joe Rogan is probably more famous than him, right, for sure. So he is an evolutionary biologist, right? And he had a lot of controversial. The most controversial book that he wrote was The God Delusion. And we have many of our scholars wrote refutations to this book because of the fact that there was a lot of incoherent arguments in there and a lot of issues as well, both on an academic, intellectual, and many other different standards. Having said that, he's not trained, according to as per my knowledge, in philosophy like that, and so that's why he made a lot of simple argument mistakes. And so you have to have some type of training or background in there before you make those types of arguments. So he was confirmed into the Church of England at 13. After learning about Darwinism, he completely lost his faith. Right? And he said, I cannot know for certain, but I think God is very improbable. And I live my life on the assumption that he is not there. Okay. So these are the four. And we want to look at some studies. Atheism is in decline worldwide. This is one study. It said that it's falling from 4.5% to 2% in 2010 and 1.8% by 2020. Okay, we find this in one study. Okay, and it's mainly due to the collapse of the Soviet Union. Okay, and it's also because of other socio-economic factors. You gotta think about our Muslims, mashallah. We have kids by the dozens. For some reason we're not scared of losing wealth and losing risk because we know it's from Allah. Having said that, I don't want to call it a fact, but I've seen it to be kind of out there that people who don't believe in God generally have less children. Right? I think there's a study like that too. If you have any, please send it my way. I remember reading things like that. Having said that, people who believe in Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, mashallah, that's actually why France had such an issue because of the fact that they a couple of generations down, they realized there's so many Muslims because all these Muslims came in so early, and they, all the kids start to grow up, be trained in their schools, whatever, and they're like, man, there's so many Muslims here now because of the fact of Muslims, mashallah, just having a lot of children, mashallah. May Allah increase us and give us families like Yusuf alayhi salam, mashallah. Okay, and another, we find 32% of French respondents declared themselves atheist, while an additional 32% declared themselves agnostic. Right, so we're looking at a huge 64% of the entire French population back in 2006. So I'm being quite frank here and quite honest. I think we find this to be the real case, that where we're looking, we're finding more atheism spread because we're finding people who less practice or are less likely to practice on Islam or any other faith in the world. And we generally think of it as on the rise. Okay, but we do find amazing studies. This was a book by Muhammad Hijab, which recently came out. Title is escaping my mind. I'll try to look it up during the break, inshallah, to give you the title. It says, according to the latest religious data from the British Attitude Survey, Muslims are more likely to retain their faith than any other religious group, 93% retention. Moreover, the latest Pew Research study revealed that the share of American Muslims who leave Islam is offset by those who become Muslim. Okay, with 23% leaving the faith in the USA, reasons for leaving include a dislike for organized religion, disbelieving in God, and never connecting with the faith, etc., etc. Okay. So what we find is that there's a lot of conflicting data about it. So I don't want you to think that, oh man, atheism is winning, or we're never going to find victory or success or whatever. Islam will, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, لِيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّهِ. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that. So inshallah, let me log off, and I'll join right back in, inshallah.
So, folks, I think we're having a little bit of technical difficulty with the voice. May have something to do with the storm systems that are around. Maulana Shakeel will just log off and log right back on, and inshallah we'll begin momentarily. Assalamu alaikum. Are you back? Maulana Sahib, are you back?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Okay. I think the sound is much better. Inshallah, let's begin.
Okay, inshallah. So hopefully, inshallah, nothing else happens. I apologize. Maybe just something in the system, whatever. Okay, so again, the most important thing is that we don't become despondent or depressed or saddened by the situation. We remain optimistic. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says, لِيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّ, that the religion of Islam will supersede all other faiths. And you have to have that conviction about your deen, your religion, your faith. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it victorious on every single platform, on every single plane, inshallah ta'ala. And so don't just follow any statistic. Look at the reality around you and look at the ground level. See what you can do and what I can do to help with this problem, inshallah ta'ala. Okay. And so in summary, right, this is this Bertrand Russell. This is the quote he says. He says, I ought to call myself an agnostic, but for all practical purposes, I am an atheist. I do not think the existence of the Christian God any more probable than the existence of the gods of Olympus or Valhalla. To take another illustration, nobody can prove that there is not between the Earth and Mars a China teapot revolving in an elliptical orbit, but no one thinks this sufficiently likely to be taken into account in practice. I think the Christian God just as unlikely. And so what we're going to find, and we're going to see this over and over again, is that atheists of our time and atheists of previous times seem to have a misunderstanding. They consider the Islamic concept of Allah to be the same as the Christian God. And so they have issues with the idea that certain Christians would believe that the earth is only 6,000 years old, whereas Islam doesn't assert that or even claim that in that way. And we don't disagree with the fact that the earth or the universe can be, whatever millions and millions of years old. That's completely fine for us. Same thing with Christians who had an issue with the earth being the center of the solar system or the universe versus the sun being the center of the solar system. Heliocentric versus geocentric models. Muslims have never had issues with accepting either one. That's not a big deal for us because, again, our religion and science don't conflict. And then the biggest kicker would be about evolution, which I wish we had time to discuss and really tackle, but we might not have time for it. The same exact thing about evolution is the same here, is that as Muslims, we really don't have too much of an issue other than the human evolution portion, where if a person were to say a monkey would evolve into a human, that's what we have a problem. In terms of general natural selection, what we see in terms of microevolution, there's really no issues for us. And even macroevolution has a certain level of being acceptability according to us, if a person really wanted to follow that. But having said that, that's the idea here, is that they conflate our religion with Christianity, and that leads to a number of problems. And even the idea of God, you and I know we don't believe in a human God. We don't believe in a God that lives in the universe. We don't believe that a God exists within time and space. We believe that there's a Lord beyond time and space who created time and space. So their idea is completely wrong, as you can see from Bertrand Russell here in 1958. So they have the skepticism, and so what we need to do is, understand that there are a lot of implications and harms. And I'm going to just slide through this real quick, inshallah ta'ala, because again, we want to go towards the final parts of this section, inshallah. Then we'll move towards the existence of God. So the implications of atheism, again, I told you before that a worldview is not just a worldview. It's not just the belief about a God. It's everything else in between. If you believe there's no creator or maker, or there's no purpose behind this universe, it was just randomly made or randomly generated, then you have no reason to hope. Right? Hope and hopelessness are both pointless. There's no point to these things. To be optimistic or hopeful in the future, I mean, what are you hoping on? Right? That something will give you. There's nothing to give you. There's nothing behind it. There's no purpose behind it. So this is an implication of atheism, right? There's no value because human life means nothing. The reason why Sam Harris can just say to drop a bomb on them is because there's no one can really objectively say that there's a reason why a human is greater than anything else in the world, or the reason that a human being is greater than animals, or even let's just say all of sentient life, or any animals or whatever, how they're greater than any inanimate objects. There's no reason to say a human is greater than, like Hamza Zorsis says, there's no reason to say that a human being is greater than a chocolate bunny. They're all the same because there's no value to anything. We're just a number of randomized atoms put together, and we just ended up having what we have today, right? So no hope, no value, and no purpose, right? When they say things like making your own purpose, you can make your own purpose. That's just another way of saying we don't really know what your purpose is, but don't go ahead and do what you want. It's the saddest reality that these scientists are so passionate about discovering design, but then they deny looking at the wonders of nature and the universe, and they see all these things, these magnificent things, but they will never accept that this entire universe was designed like that. It's a tragedy, and this is what you have to understand. Suicide rates have been growing, right, because of the fact that people accept this ideology and this way of life. Then these types of things become realities for people. No hope, no value, no purpose. Okay, so this is again Christianity's failure. It's not Islam's failure, right? What we see in the bold here, the primary target of anti-religious satire was France's official religion, Catholicism, the church's ties to the state, and its control for education. They really hated any connection to Christianity and Catholicism in particular, because of the fact that these guys would not let them study or read the Bible. They wouldn't let them research and learn. Education was very much limited by the church. They were the ones who would decide what would be allowed to be read and not read. And the flip side, you find Islam that prints whatever and whatever and whenever, and not having any type of fear of what we could find out there, because we know Islam has always had an answer to things. And the second thing is that we just love knowledge, right? We love learning. So there are a lot of reasons why it doesn't really apply to Islam. Okay, so we talked about these things before. The issues with science, the heliocentric versus geocentric models, God created the world in 6 days, existing for millions of years, creationism, and the idea that Christians were intolerant of other religions. Right, in 1697, they made the Blasphemy Act, which made it legal to disbelieve in Christianity. You'd be sentenced to death to have any official position, and you didn't believe in Christianity in the proper way that they wanted you to believe in. So because of that, Christianity just had a big headache with atheism, or a big headache with anyone who disagreed with them. And so it caused a lot of problems, right? And intolerance to education, like we just mentioned, they didn't want anyone reading anything beyond what the church wanted them to read. Okay, so our job, and the final slide, inshallah, is that we need to help treat the sickness of the heart by removing these doubts. Okay, that's our job. You and I have to, inshallah ta'ala, be the doctor in the room, be the teacher in the room, be the educator, and help them, inshallah ta'ala, help ourselves and help others by providing them the rational arguments that Islam provides, the rational arguments that our scholars have provided, so that way they can come out of this darkness, inshallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the guide. He's the hadi. We make dua to Allah that He allows our hearts to be guided, and He allows others' hearts to be guided too, inshallah. But having said that, we need to tackle these two doubts. The first major doubt is about the existence of God, and the second major doubt is, why is there evil in the world? So inshallah, if we'll talk about, does God exist? Brother Zija, do you want to give them a break or anything?
Sure. It's about it's 2:35, right? Maybe if somebody, as you said, I think it's a wonderful suggestion. Go get a cup of coffee or hot chocolate. What I would suggest to everyone, because I've seen this presentation, that get a paper and pencil with you, get a notebook, and write some of these things down, because it really will go through it piecemeal, one by one, and address these doubts. So again, it is 2:35. Inshallah, we'll begin sharply at 2:40 p.m. Just take a quick 5-minute break. For folks who may have joined subsequently, we're just on a very short break. Maulana Saab went through really setting the context for us, which is, what is atheism? Where does it come from? Why and how did it seem to flourish in certain areas, in certain time periods? And what is our responsibility, more important than anything else in this regard, which he emphasized was to seek out answers by our scholars, our imams, our professors, our shuyukhs, and then equip ourselves with the understanding. So inshallah, we will begin in exactly 3 minutes, around 2:40 p.m. So inshallah, let's go ahead and begin. I know I've seen this next session is inshallah going to be much more powerful as Maulana Saab guides us through some very important. How should we be thinking about this? So Maulana Shakeel, the floor is yours.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So hopefully, inshallah, we don't have any problems with the audio, inshallah. I'm making dua that Allah Ta'ala allows our electronics to support us in this, inshallah. And just as a reminder about, for any parents that might be listening, and maybe you're dealing with your own children with these issues, it's important to always be open. Okay. Again, we talked about how Christianity, because they blocked education and blocked the power for people to ask questions, because of that reason, people ended up hating that religion, and that hatred has now proliferated or split into our time. And so you want to be very careful about not allowing your children to ask questions. It's always important to keep a discussion with them and speak to them and be open and honest with them, because the better parent is the listening parent, the parent that can talk and speak to their children. So always try your best, myself inshallah ta'ala, that we try our best to be people who are listening to our children. If we know the answer, we try our best. And if we don't, we bring them to a scholar or an alim that maybe can address their questions, inshallah ta'ala. Okay, so now our discussion here, does God exist? So we have two big types of arguments. Okay, the first type is called deductive. The second type is called inductive. Okay, we have two types of arguments, and so it's good stuff to learn and memorize. It's not a lot of information in terms of the core stuff, and so it's easy to remember. And hopefully, inshallah ta'ala, if you are taking some notes, this will really help you out. And I hope, inshallah, maybe we can also present the slides. And if not, then this is your only chance to get this information down. So better get that paper and pen ready, inshallah. Okay. So we're going to go through deductive first, and then we'll touch on inductive reasoning. Okay. So deductive reasoning, and what I would call the more rational argument, the logical argument. Okay, inductive is more simple. Inductive is more straightforward. Deductive is the more rational and logical thing. When you're thinking about philosophy and things, this is probably the argument you'd give, and it's a good argument. It's a very good argument. It takes basically general things and comes to a specific conclusion. We're going to take general ideas and come to specific conclusions at the end. So, for example, right? Let me give you an example before I give you the example on the screen. So let's say all animals have hearts. All animals have hearts. That's premise, first idea. All animals have hearts. A camel is an animal. That's point number 2. A camel is an animal. So therefore, if I take A and B together, all animals have hearts. A camel is an animal. Therefore, a camel has a heart, right? So what I did was I took general principle A, that animals have hearts. Second principle 2, that a camel is also an animal too. And so now I put A and B together. I come up with a specific conclusion. Camels also have hearts too. Okay. So now the same thing is found in the Quran. وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about how all messengers are mortal, right? Muhammad is a messenger, right? So therefore Muhammad is mortal, right? So you take A and B, you put them together, and you make a beautiful conclusion. And the beauty of this type of argument is that it's 100% true. As long as the premises are true, as long as you can prove that A and B are correct, then C will always be correct. So if we can just make sure, and what we're going to do is we're going to apply this to an argument for the existence of God. Okay, so this is called the Kalam cosmological argument, very famously proliferated by William Lane Craig. Wrote a book about it. He credited Ghazali, rahimahullah ta'ala, but in reality, Ghazali is just one of many scholars who had worked on this argument, and he had really provided strong evidences for it. But it's a Muslim argument. That's why it's called Kalam. Kalam meaning the dialectic, or the arguments for theology, right? Arguments of belief. So it's the argument that, number one, everything that began to exist has a cause. We're going to do the same thing we did with the discussion about the camel. Everything that began to exist has a cause. That's point A. Point B, the universe began to exist. So if I say that everything that began to exist has a cause, the universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause. Everything that began to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. The universe must have a cause. Okay? So now, this is 100% true since it is deductive. The only way someone can argue against it is that they have to look at A and look at B, and they have to find certain reasons that they don't want to accept either premise, right? So they must argue that one of them, that number one, on point 1, that not everything that began to exist must have a cause, okay? Or they have to argue on point 2 that the universe is eternal. In other words, it didn't come into existence, meaning the opposite of beginning is never beginning, right? Or being eternal, right? So again, on point 1, they have to say, no, I accept that things can exist without having a cause. It might sound more famously like things can come out of nothing, right? And point 2 is the idea that the universe will be eternal, okay? So we're going to address each of these objections. So they say that nothing produced the universe, okay? Or the universe came into existence out of nothing, okay? I ask everyone here, what is nothing? What is nothing, right? What qualities does nothing have? Right? Does it have any qualities to create? Does it have any qualities to exist? It is non-existent. It doesn't make, when nothing is nothing. Okay, so whenever they say it can come out of nothing, that doesn't mean anything. That's a logical statement. We all agree that nothing means it has no qualities, no attributes, nothing. Okay, one guy very comically, he goes and claims the universe created itself. It would never existed, then it began to exist. So the one philosopher responded to him. So he said to him, "So you're saying that the universe it had to exist when it could not exist, and so when it did not exist, it had the quality to exist." And so the guy started laughing. So the guy is thinking, "Yeah, it sounds kind of strange, I know, because it is strange. It is obviously it doesn't make any sense." Okay, and so but the thing is about nothing, and so the stupidity, the foolishness of this is that they'll never believe anything else in the universe is like that. You probably heard of a very famous theory in your biology books, your textbooks, about spontaneous generation. The idea that things can, that living organisms can come out of non-living organisms or dead organisms, right? So they had an idea, a theory that that from a piece of meat, a rat would emerge, or flies would emerge. But then they realized when they actually did experiments that no, the meat didn't evolve or transform into a rat. It was just that the meat actually brought a rat over, or flies came out because they wanted to eat from the meat, right? So the idea that they wouldn't even accept the fact that things in the universe, things within this universe, can come out of nothing. And one time, my brother Bilal, you might know him, mashallah, very famous brother. He one time had a discussion with one atheist, and he goes and says, they were discussing, they were walking through a hallway, and then brother Bilal asked him and said that, what if I told you that the lights in the ceiling, they were first on the ground, and said that by themselves they flew up into the ceiling, they attached themselves to electrical cords, they put themselves with the outlet, or they put themselves with the switch. The switch flipped on, the lights put themselves into the proper place, and then they turned on. What would you say? Then the guy said that that's obviously absurd. There had to be someone who put it up there. And so then brother Bilal tells him, he says, you don't even accept that lights can be put in the ceiling, yet you believe the entire universe came out of nothing, right? So this idea is so absurd, and this is very famously documented within our books about Imam Abu Hanifa radiallahu anhu, the famous discussion he had with an atheist. So the atheist, he was going to debate him. What happened was, Imam Abu Hanifa came very late to the debate. This atheist was so angry and upset. He says, you Muslims talk about akhlaq and adab and etiquettes, and look at you coming so late for the debate. How shameful is this? Imam Hanifa said, I'm sorry, I was late because I was waiting for a boat. I was on the other side of a river. On the other side of the river, what happened was, I was waiting for the boat, and it wasn't coming. Then what happened was I'm sorry, the voice is back. Is it better now? Just making sure.
Yeah, it's going better and worse. I mean, we can hear you, but it was much better when you logged out and logged back on.
Okay, maybe I'll switch rooms. Just give me 1 second. Maybe if I switch rooms, I want to help you out. I don't want the kids to come and they're gonna have a holiday with this,
Right.
So let me just see, inshallah.
It's much better as you're speaking now.
Yeah, is it better now?
Yes.
Okay, so inshallah, maybe it's just the room. Just make dua. Okay.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. So Imam Abu Hanifa radiallahu anhu, so he said, I'm sorry, I was late. I was waiting for a boat. The boat wasn't coming. And so what happened was, I saw that the trees on the other side of the river, they cut themselves down. They put themselves down, and they sheared off, or they removed off all the bark, and they removed all the twigs and the branches, and then the tree started to cut itself in half, and then some ropes came and they tied themselves. The fiber came, and then it wrapped itself and became a raft for me. And then the boat itself came from the other side, and then I got onto it, and it took me to the other side. So then the atheist was so angry at Abu Hanifa. He says, you first come late, and then you make up this idiotic and really ignorant excuse. You're saying that a boat came by itself and magically came for you, and then it came over into this side. Abu Hanifa says, well, you don't believe in that? He says, no, I don't accept that. He said, but then you say the entire universe came out like that. And so the person actually, mashallah, because of his humility, accepted Islam. Right? So subhanAllah, just keep that in mind. And so, but what happens is, when you say nothing to a quantum physicist, it sometimes means an existence before the universe. For example, when Stephen Hawking would say that the universe came from nothing or something like that, they're not talking about nothing. They're talking about pre-universe stuff, okay? Still material stuff. And so it is not nothing. The quantum vacuum is not nothing. It is a highly structured and active entity. So now here's the thing, and here's the argument for everyone here. More simple than anything else. If someone tells you that something else created the universe, or something else made the universe, some other pre-universe stuff like the quantum vacuum, your question has to be, what created that? Okay? You just have to ask what created that. Just keep asking it. If they decide to say something before that, just ask what created that, what created that, what created that, right? It's going to lead to a big problem. So now let's just address objection number two. Objection number two is that the universe is eternal. Now, there are a lot of logical ways to argue this, philosophical answers you could give, but the Big Bang Theory really helped you out, okay? The Big Bang Theory was a big success for people who believed in religion and in God, and the fact that the universe has a beginning, because it proved that the universe had a beginning. So if you just tell them, come on, man, you really think the universe is eternal? Obviously, it must have had a beginning. We all accept this now. It's become such an accepted theory and idea, okay? So there should be no more discussion. Imam Zayd Shakir, I was sitting in one of his halaqat, one of his lessons one time, and he said that if there's a big bang, there must be a big banger. You know, like, I was like, you could have said it in so many better ways, you know. But the point is right. If there was an explosion, then what caused the explosion? Right? What made it happen? What caused it? Okay, that's what everyone will argue. And there are other reasons you could say. And one of the most famous things is that what is really eternal in this life? What are things that actually exist forever in this life? There's nothing you can really claim. Eternality or infinity are abstract concepts. They exist in mathematical discussions and equations, and they're not something that exist in the real life that you and I actually live in, right? So there's something that we have to talk about there too. But it's a separate point. Hopefully, you know, if you have a question, we can discuss it, inshallah. Okay, so now what happens is, if it's not eternal, if the universe is not eternal, it's temporary. So now I need to ask this question that, okay, you're saying it's a quantum vacuum that made it. I'll ask you what made that. You tell me some other thing before that. You call it not a quantum vacuum, you call it a quantum broom. No problem. What made the broom, right? And then what happened before that? What happened before that? What happened before that? This is what we call the infinite regress. The infinite regress is what? It is a logical fallacy. It is the big issue that the atheists cannot seem to overcome. That the fact that it's, you know, things need something before it that allow it to come into motion or allow it to come into existence. But that thing itself also has a beginning too. Okay, and that thing has a beginning, and that thing has a beginning. So now, if you're taking it logically, if you set the limit for those people who study mathematics, it's going to show you zero. Nothing could have existed. If it keeps going back and back and back and back, you're going to find that nothing could have existed. So it's just going to keep going. So now here's the problem here, and here's the solution. The problem is we need something that doesn't have a beginning. We need something that doesn't have a beginning. In other words, I see a bunch of dominoes. I see a bunch of dominoes falling. And so now my mind will go to what? Logically speaking, if I'm seeing dominoes falling, I'll think back all the way to the first domino. And I know there must have been something outside the system that hit the domino to set the dominoes into motion, that moved the dominoes into place. So we need a being called a necessary being. Okay, this necessary being is basically a being which existed prior or before meaning, of course, causally, not actually like in time, because he created time, but the idea that something existed without a beginning, right? Something that exists without a beginning, a necessary being. Okay, and if this is here, it doesn't require anything to come into existence. It itself can make everything else come into existence. Okay, this is the most, and I'm making this clear, this is the most logical way of explaining the universe's existence. Till today, until in the future, and in any other discussion we're going to have, you're not going to find any atheists to come up with a solution. They're trying their best with aliens. They're trying their best with the multiverse. We're going to get there in a second. But, you know, they're trying their best.
Mohammad, one question that has come up, and maybe you can talk about this and talk about contingent and non-contingent beings, because the question then that comes up is that they will say, well, who created Allah? If you're saying that a creator created everything.
It's coming.
Okay.
Inshallah. So now this necessary being must be super strong, right? Because of the fact that it was able to power or generate this universe. This necessary being must be super smart because of the level of intellect or intelligence that's required to create such a designed and well planned out and, you know, really intricate universe. This being has to be immaterial, meaning outside the universe. It has to be eternal because of that reason. It's not something that's made out of stuff, because then I would ask, where did the stuff come from? Okay, and it must have a will to choose to create. It has all this power, all this intelligence, right? And so now it must have this irada, this will to push something into existence. Okay, and so these ideas here, if we put them together, we just get the common sense understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so in effect, we were able to prove the existence of God using this type of argument. Okay, so now these objections that people would say, and obviously people were thinking of them while we were discussing it. So, all right, Mullah, that was great. What about these other things though? So one of the first objections that we'll address is Stephen Hawking's objection, which he said that no, this is another mystery for another mystery, right? So it's that you're substituting one mystery for another. He says that I have a better solution, because who created God? He asked the question, who created God? He says, rather than that, let's just say the laws of nature created the universe. Okay. The funny thing is, he says the laws of nature created nature. You cannot have the laws of nature without the universe. You cannot have the laws of nature without nature. And then the next question I'll ask him and say that, if you have, it's a very obvious thing. I don't think it takes a lot of discussion. But the idea that you can have laws of America without America is nonsensical. And the idea that now nature exists, how did it come to existence? What created that? The mystery still stands, no matter what he tries to say. Okay, that was the first objection. The other objection is the multiverse theory. The multiverse, and the reason why I want to tackle it, is the last refuge of the atheists. I recently had one of these programs about a week ago, and someone asked a very nice question about it, and I managed to write a 3-page paper on it. And I hope, inshallah, that brother, if he's here, alhamdulillah, barakallahu feekum, maybe, inshallah, this will help you. I think you missed the first program. You might have missed the first program about this topic here. That's why he had that argument or issue, because we can address it. Okay, what is this idea of the multiverse? Okay, Sheikh Abdul Hakim Murad said it is the last refuge of the atheist. If you're able to tackle the multiverse as Muslims, if you're able to tackle the multiverse and show how it doesn't make any sense, it's completely illogical, then what you'll be able to do is take away the last stand for these atheists, the last leg for these atheists to stand on. Okay, there's a universe making eternal universe that spews out universes randomly with different laws, right? So they say that there's this entire set of universes that are all being spewed out by this huge generating, let's call it universe factory. They're spewing out all these, like the Chinese universe factory, just choosing out all these universes, and all of them come out with absolutely crazy laws, and all of them are wrong. They have to make it clear that all of them are wrong. And by chance, the only one that came out right, completely fine-tuned, no matter how impossible or improbable it was, this is the only one that came out right. Okay, so they say that instead of believing God, we want to believe in this random universe, the random multiverse that spews out these universes. Okay, so this breaks down on many levels, though. Okay, if you think about it and you rationally target it and you rationally discuss it, it breaks down on many levels. Okay, first thing is that it doesn't have any will. Yet we have, if you ask them, does it have a will to create? Say, no, it doesn't have a will to create. Why did I stress that point about having a will to create before? It's because this is precisely what the atheists do not want. They do not want a God that has a will, that has purpose, that has an idea behind what he's doing, or has a wisdom in what he's doing. Because that would mean maybe it wants it maybe it wants to communicate with us, or maybe it wants to discuss with us, or maybe it wants to tell us things. So they don't want that. So the multiverse God does not have a will. Yet we somehow have a will. So therefore, we are actually superior than our creator or maker, which is this multiverse that they're claiming it is. This is the first issue. Second issue is that we make rational choices. We actually have aql, we have a brain, we have a mind. But this universe has no rational choices. So we have to ask the question, it's an honest question, how can we be greater than the thing that actually brought us into existence? And so that's the second issue we have here. A third problem is, and this is the problem you ask them, say, is the multiverse material? They'll say, yes, the multiverse is material. Which begs the question of where this material originated from. You can just ask, what created that? What made that? Because they're not going to accept anything that's immaterial, because that means things are beyond science, right? So there's a big issue for them there. And the fourth one, which is the most surprising and ajib thing, the most amazing and wondrous thing, is that this is a belief. They believe this to be the case, but have no evidence or delil for it. They don't want to believe in a rational, logical creator, a creator with reason and a creator with a will. They don't want to believe in that. Rather, they want to believe in something that is irrational, illogical, has no mind, and just spewing out universes one after the other, and finally they got it right. That's what they want to believe in. So that's their belief. And you want to believe in unicorns and fairy tales and Frankenstein and hocus pocus, whatever, that's your option. I want to believe in something that's more rational and logical. I think it makes a lot more sense to say that the position that Allah is all living and gives life, has irada and gives other beings irada, meaning will, he gives them will, and he has wisdom and gives wisdom, is more logically tenable. So the point I'm trying to stress here for all Muslims that are listening, you are the most logical person in the room when the atheist decides to say, I'd rather believe in a multiverse that has no rationality and is a completely random existing, it has no purpose of its own existence, let alone having purpose for why it creates. You are more logical than all those people combined. Okay? So now Allah Ta'ala is eternal and everything else. Okay? This is just a side point. Now the final question we'll address here as an objection is who created God? Okay. So again, I don't want to beat a dead horse. Is the idea that I keep telling you that this is from our books. Our scholars have already dealt with all these issues, all these topics, every single one of them. This is from a very early work of Aqidah called Aqidat al-Tahawiyah. He's a qadim bil ibtida, da'im bil intiha. He's the internal without a beginning and enduring without an end. Brother Zisha wanted me to talk about through contingency versus non-contingent. I'm not going to make it as complicated with that type of jargon. I'll make it more simple for you all. Okay. So the idea that Imam Tahawi was saying here is that he's eternal without a beginning. When you ask this question of who created God, there's a big problem here. Okay. This question is an illogical question. Why is that the case? The question says, who created God? Okay. Now follow me here. The word created, what kind of word is it in grammar? Is it a noun? Is it a verb? What is it? It is a verb. Okay, verbs have a tense, meaning they exist in a time. So when someone says, who created God? They're asking, in which time was God created? In which time did he start existing? Okay. In other words, if someone said, when is your birthday? It says, in which time were you born? Right? Same exact thing. So when they ask who created God, they're saying, in which time was God created? Now, I need to ask everyone, does that question make sense as Muslims? It might make sense for a Christian who has to deal with another headache and a half. But you and I as Muslims, we know that God does not exist within time. He created time. Okay. The question itself is illogical. Created is a verb with a tense. To ask what is before and after Allah is completely incorrect. Okay. And a lot of times this is what atheists do. When they get stuck in the logical and rational arguments, they start asking illogical or inconceivable things. For example, you might have heard this question: can God create a rock which he cannot move? Can God create a rock which he cannot move? And they say, haha, I got you, right? But their question is wrong. The same way this question is wrong here, because it's illogical. The sentence doesn't make sense. You could put it in a sentence, but it doesn't, there's no meaning behind it. It's a paradox. It doesn't make any sense. Similarly, is a rock which God cannot move. God is what in your definition? Who's God in our definition? Who's Allah in our definition? He can do everything. He has power over everything. Everything is under his dominion, his kingdom. So there's no way an existence like that could exist in the first place. And how can a rock which God cannot move exist in the first place at all? This is an inconceivable, illogical question. It is equivalent to saying, can God create a five-sided triangle? Can God create a five-sided triangle? That doesn't make any sense. So this question is an illogical question. It doesn't make any sense, and it's inconceivable that something in existence could ever be, to actually be formally made, that is beyond God's power. Or else your definition of God is incorrect, or your definition of the rock is incorrect. So the same way they just play with words to try to trip you up. And you just have to think about the question, and you get back to your ground. As long as you're thinking about the questions, you can come up with cogent answers, and may Allah give us all hidayah. Before and after are creations. Time is a creation. Time is a creation of Allah. Nothing comes before him. Nothing is prior to him. To ask who created Allah, again, is a logical question. We just said that in order to solve the infinite regress, the fact that everything had to have something before it, something without a beginning had to be there. The thing without a beginning is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he pushed everything into existence afterwards. Okay? So this is obviously, and all of this is from the Quran. قالت رسولهما في الله شك فاطر السماوات والأرض. Their messenger said, is there doubt about Allah, the maker of the heavens and the earth? He tells us, just look at your Quran and your book that tells you that he's the one who originated and made the heavens and the earth. You'll find your answers in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? So this is what the Quran told us from before. And so that's our discussion about deductive reasoning. And we'll transition to the deductive argument. It's a bit shorter than the previous one, because obviously that one is a bit more, it's a lot more flavorful than this one. Although this one is to me, it's much more beautiful. I find it to be, because it's the Quranic argument. It's really the Quranic argument. But as Isha, do you think we need a break? If we need a break, we can take a break. I don't mind.
No, I think we should keep going.
Okay, inshallah. So that was for the deductive reasoning, or the academic or intellectual argument. In terms of the simple argument is the inductive reasoning. Inductive is basically, we're going to use the intelligent design theory. So this is also called the argument from design, the teleological argument. The universe and living things within it are explained by intelligent cause, right? And it's used throughout the Quran. The idea here is that there's so much design in the universe, and it only could necessitate there had to be a designer, something that had to plan it all to come into it and into existence. And the universe is so unbelievably unlikely to produce life. There's just so many things that have to be, it's like hitting, really, it's hitting the jackpot a billion times over for things to be set in such fine details that it'll only necessitate that there has to be someone who put it as a plan to make the universe come together. Okay, and this is actually that paper I wrote that I discussed about. I discussed this a bit more in detail there. But in any case, the way that inductive reasoning works is we're going to take specific examples and come to a general principle. In other words, I'll give you an example again, like we did with deductive. What we're going to do is we're going to see a frog swimming in the water. I see a frog swimming in the water. I see this 100 times. What can I reasonably conclude about the frog? Or frogs in general? I see 100 frogs swimming in the water. I say that, frogs swim. Is this 100% true? It's not 100% true. Okay, why is that the case? Because there might be frogs I haven't seen, and definitely there are frogs in existence that will not be swimming, right? And this is what we call an issue of the black swan problem, which is that because we have a limited data set, right, a limited set of information, we're trying to make these big rational conclusions. But the reality is we only have a certain amount of information. We don't know all the facts and all the details. Okay. And so science is actually, if this does seem very familiar, science is actually a branch of inductive reasoning, right? You see this in the scientific method, right? You come up with a hypothesis, experiment results, etc., etc. You know the scientific method better than myself. Having said that, science really falls under this category. It tries to make general conclusions from specific examples, things we see in the world, and then we decide to apply it on a grander scale, maybe come up with a law or come up with theories, etc. Okay? And so also, by the way, sometimes Muslims have a tendency to say that it's just a theory. It's just a theory. It's not actually like a fact or whatever. I want you to be very careful about those types of words because they're very offensive to the scientific community. Although you might find it to be a very strong argument, for them they find it to be very offensive because of the fact that although this is a probable conclusion, right? Like this idea that we can look at specific things and come up with a general thing. It's a probable conclusion. It's not 100% certain, right? Even though that it's probable, what happens is that right here, sorry, that there is such thing as scientific facts and scientific data that has been proven so many times. I'm talking about within the lab, outside the lab, hundreds of thousands of times over, and they've seen it so many times. And so this produces a repeatable, careful observation or measurement, also called empirical evidence. And they become scientific facts that are central to building scientific theories. Okay? These strong hypotheses are developed, and then they lead to a theory. So when you tell a scientist it's just a theory, it's like you're contradicting or criticizing all this evidence. What is wrong with you? You know? So they find it very rude. So be careful. Again, even if you don't agree with this completely, we shouldn't try to offend the brother when talking to them, right? We should try our best to reason with them and be a nice person. So hopefully their hearts become closer to Islam, inshallah, right? So you want to be very careful again. So why am I mentioning all this stuff? Right? You're like, right. So what happens is sometimes the theory or the hypothesis that we're making is probably the most likely or the most simple explanation for everything else. The hypothesis that I came up with, it makes the most sense. It makes the most sense. And so every other possibility just falls apart. It doesn't make any sense. It's not as logical. It doesn't really fit any academic weight. And so this is called abductive reasoning. Inference to the best explanation. In other words, my explanation I'm giving you is the best explanation you're going to find on the topic. And where do we find this? Okay, it is like in this example here. You see a bird fall to the ground, an apple fall from the tree. Walking down a hill is faster than walking up. What is causing all of these? You see a bird fall to the ground. You see an apple fall, and now you're telling yourself, I'm seeing these realities in front of me, and I'm telling myself that gravity is causing all of these things. Gravity is causing all of these things, right? So Newton said it best. He said, it is incomprehensible that inanimate and insensitive matter can exert a force of attraction on one another without any visible contact, without any medium in between them. By the way, Newton was a believer. He believed in a God. Okay, he was a very strong Christian. Having said that, yeah, so the idea that he understood that there has to be something that's connecting these two things and pulling something down to the ground. So now here's the thing though. This is the ajib thing about scientists. Can you see gravity? No one can see gravity. Like you're like, wait, hold on, wait, slow down. Like I can't. You can't see, taste, touch, smell, or whatever. Right? There's no empirical data in that sense, right? There's no physical, direct data to it. But I do know gravity can exist, right? I mean, gravity exists because I see it around me. I see the effects of gravity, right? You see the effects of gravity. In other words, because the inference is good, and we infer that gravity is nothing doing it, all this stuff here, and it makes sense, and I see the effects of it, and I can reasonably conclude that gravity is causing all these things to happen. Okay, so through abductive reasoning, in other words, if you were to say that gravity is not causing all of this, it's something else. You went to like the famous physicists of our time and told them, I think that something else is causing the apple to come towards the ground. You say it's like it's gremlins or some goblins that are pulling it down or something crazy like that. They'll say you're absolutely absurd. It's absolutely is gravity. There's no better explanation other than gravity. This is the best explanation we have. The best explanation we have. That's great. You don't see gravity, you see the effects of gravity. We're going to do this to the creation of the universe and the design of the universe. We're going to see the effects of intelligent design in the universe. Our job is, and your job is, that you're going to show people that you see the effect of design. You see the probability, the chance. You see everything around you. The same way you concluded gravity was pulling things down to the ground, you should also conclude that you should be a designer, someone or some being that has made this universe come together. Okay, and so you find many examples of intelligent design, and you, mashallah, this is where everyone's professions come into play. That people who study science and biology and physics, and this is why Muslims were never scared about any of these fields, because we love to study these things. We really did, and we still should do. We still should love these things, because why? Because they connect us to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We see the world around us and we become amazed by it. And so I'm giving you some examples here about how amazing this world is that we live in, specifically our bodies. Our bodies have approximately 30 trillion cells. Now each of these cells has a city built inside. Each city has libraries storing information. This is called DNA. And DNA has been compared to 3.2 billion letters in over 1,000 thick volumes with fine print. This is the type of libraries that are inside each one of these cities, these cells. Each city has a powerhouse, which is the mitochondria, which is a dead has died long, is a joke which has died a long time ago. The city hall, which is the nucleus. Transport systems, which is the ER. Storage, which is vacuoles. Factories, which are ribosomes. I ask every person who's listening right now in attendance. We all know that in order to make a city, you need thousands upon thousands of humans to design a city. Yet we have 30 trillion of these cells that are cities on our bodies, and there are over 7 billion human beings like this, and even more that have passed away. It's amazing the level of design. It's amazing. Okay, so now the closest thing, the closest argument that they will bring is that they'll say that it's by chance. It's by chance that the universe came into existence. Okay, so we wanna actually mathematically calculate it, and we want to try our best to explain this, inshallah ta'ala. I'll just summarize it again, just for sake of time and brevity. Okay, so 1/10 to the 50th power is considered zero probability of occurring in real life. 1/10 to the 50th, which is 1/10 followed by like 50 zeros, basically, right? Is like the probability of occurring in real life. I think that's just about it. I can't remember if I counted it or not. I don't think I had the time to count it anyways. But having said that, probably should have been more, I think. Yeah. So it's the probability of occurring in real life. Okay. So now there are a lot of different equations. The strong force and the weak nuclear force, which have to be balanced within an atom. So that meaning the strong force, which is inside the nucleus, and the weak nuclear force, which is outside the nucleus, they had to have a certain balance. That balance is 1/10 to the 60th power, which is an unbelievably small amount. Okay, there's just certain things you want to think about. The probability of these things actually coming together by chance. Okay, gravity, the force of gravity had to be tuned to 1/10 to the 40th power, which is followed by 1/40 zeros. 1/10 followed by 40 zeros. Right. This is a very, again, these are just certain ideas and certain things I encourage you all to look up and research. Martin Rees wrote a book called Just 6 Numbers. In there, he shows you about how the universe is just completely fine-tuned upon 6 numbers, that they're so accurate and so specific that even if they were shifted by even decimals, that the entire universe would not be able to sustain life. Okay, so I encourage people to look at these things, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. I cannot have enough time to go through it, right? And Roger Penrose was a very famous mathematician. He calculated the necessary thermodynamic order and to be compatible with life, right? And his calculation was so precise. He said it had to be 1/10 to the 123rd power. There's a lot of specific things that had to come together for this stuff to exist. Okay, the world is extremely fine-tuned. This is not my words. These are the words of famous physicists. Stephen Hawking says in the bold here, the remarkable fact is that the values of these numbers seem to have been very finely adjusted to make possible development of life. Albert Einstein said the same thing. He said his religious feeling takes the form of a rapturous amazement at the harmony of natural law, which reveals an intelligence of such superiority that compared with it all systematic thinking and acting of human beings is an utterly insignificant reflection. Very beautiful words describing how amazing this universe is and how much design is found within it. Okay, this is what the Quran does. It tells you to look around and explore and tell yourself with reason in your mind, do you really think this entire thing came out of chance? It appeals to our really just a fitri thing, your intrinsic argument in your heart, telling yourself, do you really think it just came out of chance? Look at the mountains, look at the water, look at the sky, look at the stars, look at the sun and the moon. All these things around us are screaming to us that there is someone who put everything in order, made everything into a system here. Okay, and we're just going to give you one specific example here, a little detailed example. Just how did life originate on planet Earth? Okay, how did life originate on planet Earth? Again, you have two options. The idea is that chance made it happen, but it happened by chance, or a supernatural being, something beyond this universe, had caused it to come into existence. Okay, so the goal should be demonstrated that the design is too detailed to claim chance, just way too sophisticated for any of that. Okay, so again, we have one over. So I just want to explain how chance works. Okay, I want to be as simple as I can. In any case, we have 10 balls in a bag, and each one of the balls has a number from 1 to 10. So there's ball number 1, ball number 2, ball number 3, ball number 4. Okay, I have 10 balls in the bag, and I put my hand in the bag. When I put my hand in the bag, I want to pull out ball number 1. What is the probability of me pulling out ball number 1 from the set of 10 balls? It will be 1 over 10, right? And now put the ball back inside the bag. Okay, that's fine. So now I want to pull out ball number 1, and I want to put ball number 1 back in the bag. Now I want to pull out ball number 2. What are the chances that I'll pull out ball number 1 first, put it back inside, so the 10 balls again, right? And then I want to pull out ball number 2. Okay, for me to pull out ball number 1 is 1 over 10. For me to pull out ball number 2 right after that is 1 over 100. Okay, because both of them have 1 over 10 probability. You just multiply them together, get 1 over 100. The chance of me pulling out 1, then 2, that's 1 over 100. Okay, hope you're all following, hopefully, inshallah. The third, so now I want to do the same thing with ball number 3. So I want to pull out 1, then 2, then 3. And each time, again, placing the ball back in the bag. So pull out ball 1, it's 1 over 10. Ball number 2, 1 over 100. Then I want to pull out ball number 3, 1 over 1,000. And you can see that the number gets smaller and smaller, to the point if I try to pull out 10 numbers in order from 1 to 10, I have like a 1 over 10 to the 10th power, an unbelievably small amount of chance for this to happen. Okay, the funny thing is you're telling yourself that's never going to happen. It's absolutely absurd. It's not going to happen. The funny thing is that the atheist will make you more believe that the universe came out like that by chance. Kind of funny to me, right? So the thing is that if one doesn't work here, we have to accept the other one. So we'll just check. Right? We were talking about the idea of chance, how it works. We'll just check. We're going to check how to make a cell which is made out of lots of proteins. Okay, we're going to make one protein here. We're going to make one protein. It's going to be made up of amino acids, like all proteins are. There are about 20 amino acids, right? And so in order to take the right amino acid, right, there are certain steps you got to follow to make a protein. Don't worry, we're going to get there. But in order to make a protein, we have 20 amino acids to choose from. So I'm going to make one. So the first thing I want to do is I want to figure out how many amino acids I need to put them in line, put them in order. Kind of like the balls in the bag, right? They have to be in a specific order. They have to be in a specific order. If they're not in a specific order, they have the risk of becoming unusable or not sustainable for life. Okay, so the right sequence. So I have to pull out the right amino acid. So to choose the right one is 1 over 20. To choose this 500 times is 1 over 20 to the 500th power. Okay, same thing with I pulled out balls number 1 to 10. Now I'm going to do 1 to 500 by chance. By chance for this to happen by itself, 1 over 10 to the 650th power. I think we're well beyond the 1 over 10 to the 50th power. I think we're well beyond that. But it gets even worse because of the fact that all amino acids have to be left-handed, right? They have to, and left-handed, right-handed, meaning that the structure is opposite to the right-handed ones. They're just mirrors to one another. So they have to be left-handed. So to choose between a 50-50 chance, I have a half of a chance. The reason why we need left-handed ones is that they're the only ones which are observed to have life. So now the chance of getting a left-handed protein amino acid is one half. I multiply this again by 500 because I have to do this 500 times for every single amino acid, is 1 over 2 to the 500th, which summarizes to 1 over 10 to the 150th power. Unbelievably small. And there's one more thing we need to do. We have to make sure the bonds have to be peptide bonds versus ionic bonds. So now the chance of that again is 1/2. You have 50-50 chance, 2 options here. And so we have to do this again 500 times. So we get 1 over 10 to the 150th power. Again, so now we put all these probabilities together, 650 times 150 times 150, we get 1 over 10 to the 950th power. Now, mind you, that's I try to write it out for you. I don't think there's 950 zeros at all, but just understand this is the probability of just one single protein to get together, and there are 200,000 different types of proteins in a human cell. Okay, and 1 over 10 to the 50th power is considered zero probability of occurring in real life. Okay, and so there are many proteins that are longer than this, and there are many other things to discuss here. We see that chance is not a probable, it's not a likely argument at all. It's not even on the table. It's not even something you can discuss because it's just way too fine. This was just one protein, for God's sakes. We have so many more things to discuss. So chance really fails here. So we're only left with one other option, which is the supernatural being. This is the only logical option left for us to be rational. If a person wants to believe in chance afterwards, that is their belief and option. But we can't say they're being logical or rational. They're not being people that are appealing to reason here. They're just wanting to stick to their rigid and their hard beliefs here. Okay, so this makes sense of everything else. And Stephen Hawking, unfortunately, when he passed away, he was spending his entire life. My final thing, inshallah, then we give you guys a break. Stephen Hawking spent his entire life looking for the theory of everything, which he called the M theory. God to explain all other phenomena in the universe, right? The idea that Stephen Hawking was looking for was a super theory to explain everything, how it came together. If he only found the theory of God, idea of God, because if Allah exists, then everything else makes sense. And that's what we consider to be the theory of everything. Allah is the theory of everything, right? So may Allah SWT give us all tawfiq, right? And may Allah allow us to benefit from what we've heard. Inshallah, we can take some questions if there are any questions, inshallah.
So I encourage folks to type in their questions, and I'll read them off, and we'll try and inshallah address them. It is 3:24 p.m. so we have roughly half an hour left. So inshallah, I think Maulana Sahib, if you can take the 30 minutes, we can start at 3:30 and address that, and inshallah we'll end at 4. One question I had was that it often seems as if we get put on the defensive in a university environment, on media, right? That we have to defend, we have to be apologetic, right? What would be your suggestion in terms of not being on the defensive when we engage in conversations like this, to grab the moral high ground?
It's a very good question, and what I find is the most frustrating thing is that, as I hope that it was made clear here, that the arguments for the existence of God are extremely rational, and they're the most logical explanations we have for everything. But the atheist is actually the one who should be on the back foot, right? They should be on the back burner, fleeing from what we have to say. And so a lot of times we feel pressured to prove the existence of God. And you can do that. You can show them the arguments, etc. But you really need to ask them the big questions too. You should probe them. Don't let them probe you. Don't be on the back foot here. You should be the one to press forward and be brave and be courageous. Because again, you make a lot more sense than they do, as long as you maintain respect. Because what happens is, and this is part of the larger presentation, where I explain that when atheists are pressed on their beliefs and understanding of the universe, because it really doesn't make any sense, what happens is they get really offended and really aggressive. Right? So you start to see who's a real believer. Like they say that we're people who believe in blind faith. I think there are more people who believe in blind faith than we do. From the atheists I've spoken to. So there's certain things about just being not having this inferiority complex, being brave, and pressing them with questions before they press you with questions.
Jazakumullah khair. Another question: what if we wanted to pursue this, specifically the youth, say the high school students, right? What resources would you recommend that we can look at in our spare time to educate ourselves about this issue?
That's a very, very good question, and I hope, inshallah, maybe at the end I can just readdress it, because we really need to create syllabi and really have structured classes for these things. It's very, very sad that our maktab really ends only at 8th grade, and we don't have any young adult makatib or any structured classes for them for Islam. It just pains my heart that I'm trying my best to cover this in 2 hours. I think Brother
Right.
Zisha sees the rush, right? And
Right.
there's a lot of stuff here, and we just need a
So
lot of time. I'm sorry.
right. What we can do is, let's see how far we get here. But we more than happy to schedule another session where maybe, we go further in depth or cover some topics that we rushed over. I got another question, so I want to make sure, for the folks that I put them in front of you. The question, actually, it's a very good question. Can we use the moral argument against atheists?
You can use the moral argument against atheists. It works. It's a double-edged sword for them, right? Like they want to be upset that you're practicing Islam, but as people who believe in subjective morality, like the fact that morals are they don't have any proper ground or foundation, they can't be upset at the fact that our sisters wear hijab. They can't be upset as Muslims are praying stuff because we have the free right, the freedom to do whatever we want. The moral argument you can use, but what I found is, and again, it's a very emotion. It leads to a lot of emotions. That's why you can use it. You can say number one is that you shouldn't have any problem with what I'm doing, and that you don't really have any moral ground, any way to accept or reject or be upset or anything because you don't have any basis for that. You can do that, but again, it leads to a lot of emotions. So I always like my best. I try my best to keep it intellectual and having logical arguments and discussions because it going through the emotional route, which is actually what this problem of evil is about here, is that it is the emotional argument that people get offended by and upset by. And that's what atheists get really stuck on. So try your best to avoid the morality argument, but it is a good argument. I won't lie. Very convincing, very frustrating for the atheist to hear about. Right? But just be very careful again who you're speaking to.
Jazakumullah khair. So, so it's about 3:28. Let's begin, cover this last section. And as I said, I think there is, alhamdulillah, I think somewhere between 35 and 40 people have been following since we began. And, if there is interest, definitely we'll schedule a follow-up on this as well. We have until 4 o'clock. So, Maulana Sahib, if you can start with our last section.
Inshallah. So the Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and Jazakumullah khairan for everyone who is indulging me and giving me a chance to entertain everyone here. And may Allah reward you and accept you for your sacrifice. And I hope that you are benefiting, inshallah ta'ala. If Allah gives us more sessions, I'll be more than happy to spend a bit more time. I hate to say it, but I enjoy this topic in the sense that I do spend a lot of time on researching and studying this topic, and I feel bad about it. At the same time, I can't help it, So I'm always willing to take any questions and whatever. And if I can get back to you right away, I'll do it. If I can't, maybe another day, inshallah ta'ala. So now this question of the problem of evil, many times what's going to happen is, in terms of what happens on the ground level, is that people are not going to ask you about, how do you prove God exists? Or I don't know if God exists. They'll say things like, if God exists, why is there suffering in the world? Right? Why is there evil in the world? Why is there cancer? Right? Why did God send a virus? Why are we all suffering? Why are we all dying? All these things, So atheists have a big problem with this issue here. And so the reason why I started off with this intellectual discussion about the problem of God, okay, again, the problem of evil is not a new issue, okay? Blaming God for everything is the sunnah of Iblis. It is the way of Iblis. He goes and says about Allah, Rabbi famima aghwaytani, right? He said, oh God, because you have led me astray, it is your fault. I will sit and I will ambush them from your straight path or on your straight path. Okay, so Iblis is the first one to start off this discussion of hating God or having a hatred for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, the sunnah of Iblis is to blame Allah, and unfortunately he puts it in our hearts. If someone dies in our families, we say, why did God do it? Why did Allah do it? Why did this happen? Why did that happen? And so the same thing that Iblis did, the same poison he ate and he swallowed, is the same poison he's feeding us. So we have to be extremely careful here. Okay, so the reason why we started off with these intellectual discussions is because you never want to start from here. You're not going to go anywhere. You're going to hit a very terrible, you're going to hit a wall really fast, and you're not going to go anywhere. In other words, if someone asks you why is there suffering in the world, if God exists, why is there evil in the world, and things like that, you say, whoa, brother or sister, this is a very high level question. It's a very advanced question. We're going to start from basics here. Do you first accept God to exist or not? Okay? Because if God exists, and we can show you rationally that God exists, then you and I, even if we don't understand this question, it doesn't deny his existence. Does that make sense? The fact that you can prove that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists, and now they have to accept the fact that He's there, and now they have to work with the fact that I have to deal with His existence in my life. And then we can talk about this question, but never start from this question. I've never seen it end up well. You're going to end up in this terrible circle, and the person will not get any closer to finding a solution. Okay? Once you understand Allah to exist, then things make sense. Okay? So theodicy is the solution to this problem, which is the answer to the question of evil. Why is there evil in the world? Okay? So there's a lot of evil in our time. I want to make this as a quick disclaimer. There's a lot of evil things in our time. You have to work actively to solve the problems in the world. Obviously, we know that the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever sees an evil must change it with their hand. If they're unable, then with their tongue. And if they cannot do that much, at least, then with their heart. And that is the lowest level of belief, right? The Prophet ﷺ told us to change these things. Just because we accept it as a reality, within the classroom, we're talking about this, right? We're talking about evil, we're talking about its existence, etc. But in terms of the world, we're trying our best to remove evil as much as we can. Whatever bad we see in the world, we try our best to remove it as Muslims. This is a moral ethic. This is a akhlaqi, a characteristic of us that we try our best to help the world around us. Okay? So now, this is the things that you probably hear. Why did my 3-year-old granddaughter die? Why did my mother receive cancer? Why did I have to live in that house for so long? Why did I not get married yet? Or better than that is, why am I married to so and so person? Why does God allow suffering? Why does God not stop poverty? Why are there wars? Right? Why is there the virus? Etc. Etc. People ask many questions, and they get really upset with things that happen around them, both personally and universally. This is not a new thing. This is Epicurus, one of the Greek philosophers we were talking about from the beginning. He says something very ajib. He says, is God willing to prevent evil but not able? If He's willing to prevent evil but He's not able to, then He's not omnipotent. He's not qadir. He's not all-powerful. Is He able to but He's not willing to? Then He is malevolent. He's an evil God. Is He both able to and willing to? Then where does evil come? Whence cometh evil? Is He neither able to nor willing? He's asking all these questions about God. Then he goes and says, then why call Him God? If He cannot stop evil and He's not willing to change evil, then why do you call Him God? Right? So this is the type of stuff he's been saying. David Hume in the 1700s said the same exact thing. Epicurus' old questions are still unanswered. Is He willing to prevent evil but not evil? And he mentions the same exact thing about Him being an evil God, etc., etc. Okay, so you can see that this is it causes a lot of problems. There's an entire logical syllogism behind this. I'm not going to stress this one too much here because that's a more logical argument. We're going to address this question here. And the best thing for me is that I try my best to rephrase questions in a way, and I want to look at the question. Many times the answer is inside the question, because many times people ask a question, but the question itself is incorrect. There's a misunderstanding in their question. And if you can find that misunderstanding, you can always find a solution to what they're asking. Okay? And so I sometimes my answers always start out with there's a misconception in the question, because this is the idea here. So let's look at this question here. Why is there evil in the world? Why is there evil in the world? So my question would be, why is there the world? Okay. So I'm understanding there's a problem in the person who's asking the question. They said, why is there evil in the world? But they're forgetting the bigger question, right? Evil exists inside the world. Why does the world exist? Okay? Why does the world exist? This is the first question you and I need to address. And as Muslims, I'll ask everyone here, why is there the world? Why does the world exist? Okay? I think, what's going to happen, and this is the feeling the person's mind, is that they get upset that evil exists in the world, and they're thinking it shouldn't exist. This world should not have evil. And so I see this person as confused. I really see them as confused. He doesn't know why the world was made. So I need to educate them. And so as a Muslim, you're feeling that I think I know why the world is here. Right? The world wasn't made to be completely good. A completely good world is Jannah. The world wasn't created to be completely evil, quote unquote. That's a world called Jahannam. Right? There are different realms for these things. So he thinks the world was supposed to be made with complete goodness or complete happiness or joy and enjoyment or whatever. That's his idea and understanding. And I see this as a big misconception, because I know as a Muslim, the reason for the creation of the world was that it was a test. It is a test. And this is our solution and our response to people who have this issue. They're not understanding why the world was made. The world is designed as a test. This test has two mechanisms. وَنَبْلُوكُمْ بِالشَّرِّ وَالْخَيْرِ فِتْنَةً. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Anbiya, this test has two mechanisms. We'll test you through good and we'll test you through evil. Okay? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says it in the Quran, we'll test you through evil and good as a trial. Right? So now, why does God allow it? Now, here's the thing. And so now people, you have this discussion. So now I explain to them and I say that, look, brother or sister, this world has been designed as a test. It's not made to be completely good or completely evil. That's not the purpose of the world. The purpose of the world is to test. Okay? Now, why does God allow it? He'll say that, okay, I understand. But why is there suffering in the first place? Why does God allow it? It procures this question, right? Why does God allow it? What was the purpose of the world again? If we understand it is a test, if we understand how a test should work, is that evil is the byproduct of this test. You know, if you have a test, you have a paper in front of your exam, you're going to find, let's say, multiple choice questions, right? You have A, B, C, or D. There's only one answer which is right. There are multiple answers which are wrong. This evil is the fact that people are getting their answers wrong, right? This is just part of the fact that it is a test. The idea is that people will commit this evil and these atrocious acts because of that reason. Okay, so now what is being tested? So I will ask the question to them. What is being tested? And the deeper question here is, what is exclusive to humans and jinns that allow us to be tested? And now everyone in their minds is thinking, oh, I know I have something that other things, other creation in this world don't have, which is I have free will. I have the ability to choose. Okay, now here's the thing about a test. And if you think about a test, it will make a lot of sense. Okay, is that if you're only allowed to have a test if you have free will, you have the ability to choose. Okay, if you're in a classroom and the teacher's forcing all the answers on your paper, that's not really a test here, right? You're not really choosing anything. The test can only exist when people have a choice to choose answers. And so this is something the angels were very well aware about. They said this in the beginning of time. It's Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah number 30. The angels said, قالوا أتجعل فيها من يفسد فيها ويسفك الدماء. Will you create therein, meaning in the world, people who will spill blood and cause corruption and spill blood? The angels knew that human beings would choose the wrong thing. Many of them will choose the wrong thing. Okay, so now here's the thing. The test will require what? That the teacher, he sits at his table, he allows the students to take their exams, and they are allowed to freely answer whatever they want. They can put whatever they want on the paper, and they're allowed to take their test. But that is what a test is about. And so this is the thing we need to understand. You know, when we consider about, like, people ask this question, you say that you're saying this world is completely designed, but I see it as flawed. People say that it's a flawed world. They say cancer is a flaw, viruses are flawed, death is a flaw, right? They say that this is a flaw, this is a flaw. They think that evil is a flaw in this world. And I tell them, I say that, listen, this world wasn't designed for being perfectly good or perfectly evil. The perfectly good world would be like Jannah for us, and the perfectly evil world would be Jahannam for us, right? The perfectly designed world for a test is this world. And wallahi, Allah Ta'ala has designed a perfect test for everyone. Everyone always feels in this life that this is a test. This is what we feel in this life. Allah Ta'ala designs a test in the perfect way. He's like that. He's Al-Kareem, He's Ghafoor and Rahim, mashallah. So in any case, so now you have to press them. Now that we understand, we're inside a test room. The test hall would demand that there are right answers and wrong answers. This is what a test is. And Allah Ta'ala creates the most perfect test. People have to have the complete option to choose which one they want. Either right or wrong, good or bad, they have to have the option. Right? They have to have a certain amount of time. There's a certain time, 2.5 hours or 5 hours, whatever. They have to have a certain amount of life to be able to answer yes or no, stuff like that, right? There's so much things that go into a test, right? So now my question to them is, you're saying God is letting it go, He allows it. I would ask them, why are you assuming that God will not take care of it? Are you really thinking Allah won't take care of it? And this is not what I would ever understand, and no Muslim should ever understand this. We have a pixel, and He has the picture. That we have a small portion of the equation, the full equation, the full demonstration of Allah's justice and mercy and kindness. The demonstration that we can fully observe will be on the Day of Judgment. Okay? He is just, and everything will be compensated for. Again, this life is a test. If this life is a test, there must be a place where we get our results. This place is not the place of results. No Muslim should ever feel that because I have good dunya, that I have a lot of money, or my family's okay, or whatever,
Um, it doesn't mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is quote unquote pleased with me or not. Those are indications. Stronger indications that you're a Muslim. And even stronger indication is that you're a Muslim with good actions. But we don't know until the time of death who Allah Ta'ala chooses to be in His mercy, you know? We have to make dua every day. Allah Ta'ala, let me die with the kalima la ilaha illallah. In these difficult times of atheism, I don't know if I will die in Islam, or my children will, or my grandchildren will die in Islam. Allah grant hidayah, guidance to all of our people, Ya Rabbal Alameen. All of the Muslims and non-Muslims, Ya Rabbal Alameen. So now, this world is not the world of results. The world of results is in the hereafter. Okay? And on that day, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will show you His justice, everyone will accept Allah Ta'ala's plan. Everyone will accept Allah Ta'ala's plan. And this is so critical and so astounding that the Prophet ﷺ said in a beautiful hadith, he says that no one enters the fire, even no one enters Jahannam, except they know that they deserve the fire more than Jannah. Ibn Kathir rahimahullah ta'ala brings this under the ayah فَاعْتَرَفُوا بِذَنْبِهِمْ in Surah Al-Mulk, that they acknowledge their sins. So the Prophet ﷺ says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will explain to them and they will see why they entered the fire. And they'll say that, Ya Allah, I deserve this. Can you imagine that? It sends a shiver down my spine to even think about it. May Allah protect us from it. But Allah Ta'ala's His justice is so convincing, and everyone will accept it to such a degree that people who even enter the fire will say, yes, we definitely deserve this. Allah Ta'ala protect us from that. You have to understand that the justice that Allah Ta'ala will establish, even animals that there was some wrongdoing or oppression, Allah Ta'ala will make justice between them too. The animal that attacked the animal without horns, the animal that had no horns will be given horns on the day of judgment, and he'll be allowed to take his and transact his justice on that day. Allah, we don't even have courtrooms for animals like that in this world. Let alone, people, we put innocent people in jail on a daily basis. We sometimes let out criminals into the world. We have a lot of problems, Allah Ta'ala's justice and His courtroom on the day of judgment is unbelievably fair, it's unbelievably just. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us on that day and allow us to go into Jannah through His mercy. And now what we understand is, and I explained to, anyone who has this question, I said that you're looking at the evil in the world as what Allah created us for. He didn't create us for this world. He created this world as a testing ground, as a place that we can plant our seeds, and in the hereafter we'll get our full reward and results. So now the difficulties and the hardships and the suffering that happens in this life, it's not the goal of this life, it's a means of obtaining reward. Like if I were to ask you, like if we go back to those questions in the beginning of this presentation that we had here, that why did God allow why did my 3-year-old granddaughter die? What answer would you give? Right? You could say that perhaps there's a high level of reward if you can be patient. Inshallah, your granddaughter will be in Jannah, right? You could say like a lot of things, right? Maybe your status will be increased because of this difficulty you're having. Maybe your sins will be forgiven, right? That wife that's living in that house, she hates that husband so much, right? Maybe there's such a high level of ajr. I think it was Imam Asma'i rahimahullah ta'ala, or one other famous sheikh of the past, who mashallah, like there was a conversation between him and his wife, and so mashallah, the wife was extremely beautiful and the husband wasn't, given like a 4 out of 10, not the most attractive guy in the book, right? So the wife said, I think we'll both enter Jannah. I think we'll both enter Jannah. Sheikh, the guy asked and said, how's that, wife? He said, well, I think you'll enter Jannah. The wife says, I think you'll enter Jannah because whenever you look at me, you thank Allah Ta'ala. You make shukr to Allah. And whenever I look at you, I make sabr and patience with Allah. And so then I will enter Jannah too. So, mashallah, there are a lot of rewards for patience. We don't understand these things. We don't realize these things. There's a lot of raising of ranks. Certain places in Jannah we could not obtain. But because of the patience we had in this life, Allah will allow us to obtain it. And one of the most amazing and astounding things is that you are connected to Allah. I tell you, and I've seen this multiple times. Unfortunately, may Allah to save us, we're victims of this too. That when life is going, it's all easy peasy lemon squeezy, it's all good in the hood, like we're all happy. What happens is that we don't really worship Allah. It's like, oh yeah, we wake up sometimes, we don't wake up sometimes. Sometimes we never go to masjid for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, whatever. We completely abandon it. But once a calamity comes, and I've seen this before, that brother who never came for Fajr, who never comes for any Salah, but he's going through a difficulty in his life. I see him now giving the adhan for Fajr Salah, praying every single Salah in the masjid because he needs his problem solved. He sees Allah Ta'ala, Allah's power, and now he's coming regularly. The sad part is that once Allah Ta'ala solves this problem, takes care of the situation, never see him anymore. We can return to Allah Ta'ala through these difficulties. It's one of the most beautiful things. I know people look at it as a terrible thing, but sometimes we feel this such a happiness. A person who has a fever, he has a fever at night. The Prophet ﷺ says, whoever goes through a difficult fever at nighttime, he wakes up with his entire body forgiven of sins. There's no sins left on his body. So the Prophet ﷺ has said this very beautifully. It's Hadith Muslim. And reflect on this about the world of testing and the world of results. The Asman Zameen Farq, the difference between both. That the person who had the most pleasing life in this world. Imagine this man, billionaire, lamp of luxury, silver spoon, fed on a silver platter, amazing person in this world, and he has so much fame and fortune and whatever you can imagine. But he's a person of the hellfire. He'll be summoned on the day of judgment, and he will be plunged into Jahannam. So imagine this, he's a disbeliever, and he's put into Jahannam for a single moment, and then he'll be taken out from the hellfire. And he'll be said, oh human being, have you ever beheld any good at all? Have you ever felt a single joy? And you will say, no, Ya Rabbi, I never felt a single joy. You'll forget everything about this life. Once the day of results come, you completely forget about the world of testing. And on the flip side, the person who suffered the most in this world, the person who had the most difficulties, imagine them. They lost their family, they lost their parents, they lost their wealth, they lost everything, limbs, whatever it might be, their sight, whatever it might be, man or woman, Allah Ta'ala knows. But this person is a person of Jannah. They'll be taken and dipped to Jannah for a single moment, then taken out and said, oh human being, have you ever seen any bad at all? Have you ever experienced a single misery? And you say, no, Ya Rabbi, my Lord, I have not seen a bad or suffered a single misery. No, the next life will make us completely forget the life of testing. Any pain or sadness, the Prophet ﷺ said, a believer is never stricken with any discomfort, illness, anxiety, grief, or worry, even the pricking of a thorn, but Allah will expiate his sins on account of his patience. Right? Any difficulty we have is going to forgive our sins. Another hadith that we find, the complete forgiveness of sins, that the Prophet ﷺ says that a person, a Muslim male or female, continues to remain under trial in respect of his life, his property and offspring, until he faces Allah Azza wa Jal with no record of sins, like completely free of sins. We find natural disasters. People ask this question about the plague and pandemic or whatever. Aisha radiallahu anha said, I asked the Messenger of Allah about plagues, and he said, it is a punishment which Allah sends upon whomsoever he wills. But Allah has also made it a mercy for the believers. Anyone who remains in a town which is plagued with pestilence, meaning a disease, maintaining patience, expecting the reward from Allah, and knowing that nothing will befall him except that which Allah Ta'ala has foreordained or decreed for him, he will receive the reward of a shaheed. You'll get the reward of a martyr, subhanAllah. Like there, you almost feel like what an honor that even if we feel bad. I feel bad. I lost a lot of friends to this virus. I lost family members to this virus. May Allah grant them Jannatul Firdaus, make them for the martyrs of this ummah. But you almost feel like, wow, what a great position they'll have in the hereafter, and I'll be reunited with them. So what is that real loss? What am I complaining about? Bodily impediments. The Prophet ﷺ said, Allah Ta'ala says, Hadith Qudsi, when I afflict my slave in his two dear things, his eyes, and he endures patiently, meaning he lost his vision, he lost his sight, but he remains patient with Allah. Allah says, I will only compensate him with Jannah. I'm only going to give him Jannah at the end. When people lose children, it's one of the most difficult things. Right? Thamratul Fu'ad in the Hadith. The Prophet he says they're called the fruit of the heart. Right? The Prophet says, it's a long narration, I'll summarize it for you. When a child of a person passes away, Allah addresses the angel saying, did you take away the soul of my servant's son? The angels reply, yes. And then Allah asks, did you take away the fruit of his heart? And the angels say, yes. And then Allah asks, how did my servant respond? The angel say, he praised you. And he said, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. To Allah we belong, to Allah we return. Then Allah says, build for my servant a palace in Jannah and name it Baytul Hamd. SubhanAllah. And we find that the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ say that the children of the believers are on a mountain in Jannah. Sayyidina Ibrahim and Sarah alayhim as-salam are looking after them until they are returned to their parents the day of Qiyamah. When people lose their children, such a heartache, such difficulty. But the Prophet ﷺ consoles them and says, don't worry, the reunion is going to happen. The connection will happen again. In the hereafter, every believer will be reunited. And subhanAllah, the same way you leave your children with their grandparents when you need to go out and take care of certain things, or the husband and wife want to have some alone time, they leave them with their grandparents. The grandparents of the believers, Ibrahim and Sarah alayhim as-salam, are caring for the children of the believers until they come to the hereafter and they are able to take them back. This is so beautiful the way we understand it. And this is what Sahaba understood. We complain about everything. And it pains my heart that believers complain. the Prophet ﷺ was given the ummah of shukr, of gratitude. People were just happy and grateful to Allah. A woman came to the Prophet ﷺ and complained and said, I suffer from epilepsy. I receive seizures, right? And during my fits, my body is exposed. So he said, Ya Rasulullah, make dua for me. Pray to Allah Ta'ala for me. Then he replied, ﷺ, if you want, you can endure it patiently, and you will be given Jannah for this thing. And if you wish, I will make dua to Allah and He will cure you. Now, you already see her answer. But what would you and I say? Ya Rasulullah, I know Jannah is great, but I would really be happy if I didn't have this anymore. Like we'd be so happy to remove it right away. We see that it's a hardship, a difficulty. We don't want to embrace it and endure it. We'd rather just, go through it. We'd rather just, get rid of it right away. It's like, yeah, Jannah's cool and everything, but I really don't want this problem. Look at her answer. This is Sahaba. She said, I shall endure it. Then she said, but my body is exposed, so praise to Allah Ta'ala that it may not happen. The Prophet made dua for her. They're willing to go through the hardship if it meant that you'll get success in the year after. I'm not saying that we ask for hardships. I'm saying that sometimes they happen in our life and we don't understand why. The best thing sometimes is just being patient and know that Allah's plan is very deep. It is very deep. This is the realm of testing. It is not the realm of it's not the place of reward. So now the final thing that we'll address is evil really a problem? Is it really a problem? What we just talked about, okay? Because I don't really have much time to go through it. But I'll address this question here, because the idea is that evil is a subjective thing. It is something that, like we talked about before about morality, subjective morality. Even our concepts of good and evil, we don't really know which ones are good or evil, right? Sometimes we think we'll get married to the girl of our dreams, right? This lady Fatima that we love so much, mashallah, we loved her so much. And I apologize if any husbands have a wife named Fatima. I'm totally not intending you here, bro. Mashallah. But the idea that someone might have this. Sorry. Okay, no. So he thinks that this girl is of his dreams, and then she thinks that I'm gonna marry Muhammad or Abdullah, and he finds like this guy's like such a dirtbag. We don't know. Sometimes we think something is good for us, it's really bad for us. Love is a good thing, but if it's used for zina and haram interactions and relationships, it's not a good thing anymore. Same thing with evil. We only really know if something is good or evil if we know how it'll turn out at the end. Okay? The only being that knows how it'll turn out at the end is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? So this is the problem, that we don't really, we can't say that something is objectively good or objectively evil other than what Allah Ta'ala tells us, because He's the one who knows everything, So when someone says, wow, what a bad thing that's happening to you, I mean, maybe because of that bad thing that happened to them, they're entering into Jannah. Some people go through an accident in life, and then because of that accident, they accept Islam. There are certain things in life you don't know, we really just don't know. So the problem is we don't talk about Allah Ta'ala's attributes. Allah is Al-Hakim, and He's Al-Adl. He is the most wise, and He's the most just, and he's so subtle. He's very, very gentle. Okay, because he's all wise. You cannot say, right? Through the story of Khidr alayhi salam, right? You notice these things, and I'll summarize it very quickly here. A ship was damaged, right? In the story of Khidr alayhi salam, this idea, you and I will see a ship being damaged and say, wow, what a terrible thing that's happening. But you and I didn't realize that it was going to protect it from greater harm. Sometimes we get injured and we're not able to walk for a week or 2 weeks or maybe 3 months. But maybe there was an accident we were going to fall into. So then, because our foot was damaged or injured, now we were saved from the accident, right? Some people miss their flights. And I remember one brother telling me, subhanAllah, like a real life scenario. He told me that I missed my flight, and that flight ended up crashing. Like, Ya Rab, subhanAllah. Like, we don't know. Sometimes something, you might end up failing an exam or mess up the MCATs or whatever it might be. And then you're like, wow, what a terrible thing. But it led to so many good things. We really don't know. We really don't know. A boy was killed in the Khidr alayhi salam story, right? And Khidr alayhi salam is really acting like the will of Allah. Things are just happening in the world, like just accidents, harm, damages. Just Khidr alayhi salam is acting like the normal acts of nature in life for us. So a boy was killed, but it was to provide relief for the parents and the boy. I think people forget that. He was a boy, a young boy, and he was a Muslim boy, mashallah, he's going to Jannah, inshallah ta'ala, right? And so there is a greater benefit for all at the end of the day. And so we would never be able to even judge that. We wouldn't be able to understand that. We would just like forget it. Totally don't understand it. And the last part of the story was a wall was fixed without compensation. A wall was fixed without compensation. And Musa said to Khidr alayhi salam, you should have taken some money for this wall. You should have taken some money for this wall. And Khidr alayhi salam says, I got to separate from you now. Because what was underneath the place where the wall was going to fall was a treasure which was for 2 orphan boys that their father, who was pious, left it behind for them. So this treasure would have been uncovered It will be uncovered in the future as long as the wall doesn't fall. So Khidr alayhi salam tries to fix it and do a good deed without compensation. And sometimes what happens in life is that we give sadaqah to the masjid, or we do so much work for the masjid. And really, people who are volunteers, may Allah reward you, because there's no appreciation for volunteers. This entire program, the stress of making sure that everything's working. I'm just talking here. The real du'as are coming from the brothers and sisters who try to make sure this entire thing functions properly, you know? They do so much work without any appreciation, you know? So Allah gives us the story of Khidr. There are people that are working without compensation too. And what happens is what? There's a huge benefit later on. You don't know that the masjid that you contributed a certain amount of money, and no one was really thankful to you or grateful to you. But because of that, the treasure in that masjid could be unearthed by children who will come and read the Quran and maybe become the next Imam Bukhari or Imam Abu Hanifa of their time. But you allow them to study and learn because you did something without compensation. You didn't care about that. Sadaqat, a good deed. Sometimes we do things. And Allah is telling us at the end of times, because Surah Al-Kahf is really about the end of times. At the end of time, people are going to ask about the problem of evil. So Allah gave the solution in the story of Khidr alayhi salam, that this entire problem is solved through the story of Khidr alayhi salam. That we don't know the hikmah, the wisdom behind all these things. Everything's not how we see it to be. Okay? And the final thing,
yes, if we could, I hate to do this, but unfortunately, we've come up to the end of our time. So if you could just bring this to an end.
Completely fine. I'm summarizing it here and we'll be done, inshallah. So to the final comments, inshallah ta'ala, is that as we probably noticed here, that if we had more facts and details, we'd see that there was a lot of wisdom behind Allah Ta'ala's plan. And I mean it. And I say, wallahi, on the day of judgment, when Allah Ta'ala explains everything to you and I, we'll say, wow, that was an ingenious plan. We don't have the wisdom. We don't have the prerequisite knowledge to understand what Allah Ta'ala is doing. He is Allah. He is the most wise. He has all the knowledge. He's beyond what we can understand about intellect and reason and rationality. He's really beyond all these things. He has the most of everything, you know? So he's perfect. His plan is perfect. His hikmah is infinite, right? So now one sheikh said, and this is a summary here, that Abdul Rahman al-Shahuri rahimahullah ta'ala said that where you were to take the unseen, if Allah gave you the keys to the unseen, all the destiny and everything, and you were given it, you would not choose, you know, you were given all of human history, everything, you would not choose except that which Allah Ta'ala willed. Because you cannot design better than Allah. You cannot be more wise than Allah. You cannot be more knowledgeable than Allah. That's illogical. Okay? So may Allah give us tawfiq. Some people would not want to accept it this moment, but it's real, right? Either you accept it or not. You gotta jump ship. Jannah will still exist, the day of judgment will still exist, and all these things will still exist. We have to make the right decision here. That rather we should live a life that is worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the why me is because it's you, right? The test is designed for you and I. We have to embrace it and accept it. The more we submit, become Muslims to Allah, the more we'll find success and happiness in this life. Okay? May Allah give us all tawfiq, inshallah.
Jazakumullahu khair. I think it was apparent your mastery of this subject and your passion for helping us understand. I think this is an extremely vast but important and critical topic. And we've already had a number of requests to have a follow-up session. So inshallah, I'll work with you and we'll see we can come up with a follow-up session where we explore some of the concepts that you touched upon in more detail next time, or some of the topics that we couldn't get to. For all of us, this is a very, very critical area. And I think the walkaway that I'm going to keep is we have a pixel. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the whole picture. And just keeping that helps understand and explain so much. So I would like to, on behalf of FNCMC and all of the somewhere between 35 and 40 folks, and hopefully more, they were attending with people who attended, I would like to say Jazakumullahu khair to Maulana Saab for helping us understand and explore these issues so carefully. And may it be a source of benefit for all of us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless the work that you are involved in. And I would like to ask one more favor of you, Maulana Saab, if you can just conclude this session with dua. And if we can get a commitment from you that we'll have a follow-up session on this.
Inshallah, if people would like it, and I apologize. You can see how so much material to go through. I ask for forgiveness too, for anyone who felt like I offended them or I didn't speak clearly enough. Please forgive me, inshallah. And I would love to come again, inshallah ta'ala. Really, as much as benefit we can, for our own khidmat, right, we can provide, inshallah ta'ala.
Okay.
Jazakallah khairan, Brother Zisha, and all the brothers, the administrators, and the committee members, mashallah, that made this happen.
Can you end with dua for us?
Inshallah. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما صليت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما باركت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد ربنا ظلمنا انفسنا وان لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين اغفر لنا يا مولانا انك انت الغفور الرحيم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار اللهم طهر قلوبنا اللهم طهر قلوبنا اللهم طهر قلوبنا يا أرحم الراحمين. Ya Allah, please forgive us for our sins, Ya Allah. Please forgive us for our mistakes, Ya Allah. Please forgive us for the sins of our hearts, Ya Allah. Please forgive us for the sins of our limbs, Ya Allah. All the haram things we looked at, Ya Allah. All the poison we looked at, Ya Allah. Please, Ya Allah, please forgive us for all these gunah, Ya Allah. All these mistakes, Ya Arhamar Rahimeen. Ya Rahman, Ya Kareem, Ya Dhul Jalal Ikram, Ya Allah. Please remove the doubts of atheism from our hearts, Ya Allah. Please give us the nur of hidayah and guidance, Ya Rahman Rahimeen. Ya Allah, allow us to be strong believers, Ya Rahman, Ya Rabbal Alameen. Give us iman like the Sahaba radiallahu anhu, Ya Rabbal Alameen. Give us faith and beautiful faith like the Prophets, alayhi salam, Ya Rahman Rahimeen. Ya Rahman, Ya Kareem, Ya Dhul Jalal Ikram. Ya Allah, strengthen our iman in these difficult times. Ya Allah, we worry about ourselves, we worry about our family, we worry about our children, we worry about our grandchildren, we worry about the Muslims of the future, Ya Allah. We worry about all the Muslims of the world, Ya Rahman Rahimeen. We worry about our non-Muslim brethren, our non-Muslim neighbors, Ya Allah. Please, Ya Allah, guide us all to hidayah and understanding, Ya Allah. Please, Ya Rahman, Ya Kareem, Ya Dhul Ikram, Ya Allah, your plan is so just, Ya Allah. In the difficult times, Ya Allah, allow us to remember you, Ya Allah. In the difficult times, Ya Allah, allow us to pray to you, Ya Allah. Please, Ya Allah, forgive us, Ya Rahman Rahimeen. Grant us Jannah Firdaus. We don't deserve it, Ya Allah. We don't deserve it, Ya Allah. We don't deserve it, Ya Allah. But Ya Rahman Rahimeen, you can forgive everything, Ya Allah. Put us in Jannah Firdaus with Habib Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Ya Allah. Please, Ya Allah, accept this masjid, Ya Allah. Accept all the brothers and sisters who took out their time of their day, Ya Allah, to learn something of the deen and listen to something of the deen, Ya Allah. Please, Ya Allah, accept all of them, Ya Rahman Rahimeen. Please, Ya Rabbal Alameen. Please, Ya Allah, give us the more opportunities, Ya Allah. All of us to give us opportunities, Ya Allah, to serve your deen, Ya Rahman Rahimeen. Please, Ya Allah, put in the mizan, the scale of good deeds, Ya Rahman Rahimeen. Please, Ya Rabbal Alameen, put us in Jannah Firdaus with Habib Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين. الحمد لله.
Jazakumullahu khair. We will be in our du'as. Maulana Sahab, please keep us in your du'as, and inshallah we will schedule another session in the future. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.